Good Sunday morning, everyone. It's April 27th, 2025, and I got urgent breaking news to share with you all as the latest Storm Prediction Center has expanded the moderate risk now into most of Iowa, as well as in parts of Wisconsin and Minnesota. But the worst thing about all of this is it is mainly driven by a 15% significant for strong to intense EF2 to EF3 plus tornadoes. And then there's a damaging wind side of this as the SPC has a 30% non-sig for wind gusts over 60 to 70 miles an hour. But the most concerning aspect to all of this will be the very large to giant hailstones that is forecasted across all of Wisconsin, most of Minnesota into Iowa, northern Missouri, and eastern portion there of Kansas, with hailstones that could exceed up to 2 to 3 inches in diameter or larger. Now, with that being said, let's take a closer zoomed in view on every single city that is going to have a risk for tornadoes for Monday during this prolific tornado outbreak that is quite serious. So first of all, we're starting in Iowa here, where there is a 15% significant for tornadoes in Spencer, Iowa, Mason City, Iowa, Waterloo, Iowa, Cedar Rapids, Iowa, Des Moines, Iowa, Ames, Iowa, Carroll, Iowa, and then there's a 10% significant there for Iowa City and also for Davenport, under that 10% significant for strong to intense tornadoes. Dubuque, Iowa, on the border there of a 10 to 15% risk for strong to intense tornadoes. Here's a look at Minnesota at a closer zoomed in view on where the highest tornado threat will be. If you are in Minneapolis, St. Paul, if you're in Rochester, if you are in La Crosse, Minnesota, there is a big time risk for strong to intense tornadoes where there's a 15% risk there. And then of course in Grand Rapids, Minnesota, there's a 5% risk for tornadoes. And again, maybe an isolated strong tornado cannot be ruled out there. Fergus Falls, 5%. Moorhead, if you're in International Falls. Ely, if you're in, under a 2% risk for tornadoes in that area. Now let's look at Wisconsin because, most of Wisconsin is under a threat for strong to intense tornadoes. This includes for Eau Claire or Eau Claire. If you are in La Crosse, Wisconsin, Madison, 10%, 15% risk for strong to intense tornadoes. Wausau, if you're in Hayward, Rice Lake, if you are in Green Bay, if you are in Milwaukee, there's a 5 to 10% risk for tornadoes that are significant in these areas. So keep that in mind. Another metropolitan area here affected by this. If you are in northern Illinois, or northern half that is, Rockford, if you are in Aurora, if you're in DeNalb, Chicago, there is a 2 to 10% chance for tornadoes. And remember, that hatched area is significant. So a strong to intense tornado cannot be ruled out in that area. And then, of course, if you are in northern half of Missouri, Jefferson City, there's a 2% risk for tornadoes for your area. If you're in St. Joseph, Maryville, Kansas City, and on the Missouri side, there's a 5% risk for tornadoes, including for Memphis, Missouri, as well as Kirksville under that 5%. Now, looking at the Kansas state area, Olathe, if you're in Topeka, if you're in Manhattan, there's a 5% risk for tornadoes there. Coffeyville, if you're in Wichita, if you're in, say, Hutchinson, there's a 2% chance for tornadoes there and a 5% to the east of that. And there are a lot of metropolitan areas here because you can see the bigger dots do indicate that those cities are bigger. And you do need to take this seriously if you're in that area because we do not need mass fatalities from these tornadoes. Make sure your weather radio is working because, a prolific tornado outbreak is expected on Monday. Now, looking at the Oklahoma area, Bartlesville, 5% risk. Oklahoma City, Norman, Oklahoma, where the SPC is located, there's a 2% risk for tornadoes there. Lawton, Oklahoma, a 2% risk. If you're in Elk City, a 2% risk. Woodward, a 2% risk. Ponca City and Enid, right around 5% risk for tornadoes. And then last but not least, Childress, Wichita Falls, and Abilene are both under a 2% risk for tornadoes on Monday. And before I get ahead of myself, there is also a slight risk for severe weather on Sunday. I did not want to forget about this with a large slight risk. Looks to be like a seahorse, doesn't it? Look at that. Looks like a little seahorse or a little 3 there over the high plains. And this is a pretty big, narrow corridor stretching all the way from western Texas all the way up here into Montana and central North Dakota. And this is not just your ordinary slight risk. This is driven by a pretty hefty size 5% risk for tornadoes all the way from western Texas, western Oklahoma, all the way into western Kansas, into western and central Nebraska, under that 2% and 5% risk for tornadoes. And hey, there's a little small itty bitty sizes of a 2% risk for tornadoes there on the border of North Dakota and Montana. There's also a wind risk, but not really that bad at all compared to the tornado risk, where there's a 15% in both different areas here of winds that could reach 60 plus miles an hour that I've circled in here in black. And then of course, when we take a look at the hail risk, there is a 15 sig for large hailstones that could reach sizes up to 2 to perhaps 3 inches in diameter, enough to cause some destruction, some broken windows, some dented cars. That is going to be the concern here. So make sure you have your weather radio on. If a severe thunderstorm or a tornado warning gets issued for your area tomorrow, please take that seriously, because again, these storms will be capable of producing all significant or all severe hazards with significant hail that is likely. Now, with that being said, I do want to address the severe weather risk on Tuesday across Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, southern Missouri, southern Illinois, most of Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky, northwestern Tennessee, as well as Pennsylvania, New York, and West Virginia, under a slight risk for severe weather, and that is for New York, and that is for Vermont as well. Man, another big slight risk out of this. So a pretty active day, actually. Widespread severe weather risk all the way in these areas. And this is not driven just by a typical slight risk with no SIG probabilities. There is, in fact, SIG probabilities down here across western Texas yet again, likely going to be driven by a risk for large hail and damaging wind gusts, and maybe a 2 to 5% risk for tornadoes at this given time. And last but not least, I do want to address the fire weather risk across central and southern New Mexico. This is a life-threatening situation that is unfolding. We could have a firestorm break out across central and southern New Mexico, including for Las Cruces. If you are in Albuquerque, if you're in El Paso, Texas, this is a really, really bad urgent situation that is unfolding due to very strong, powerful winds blowing dust. We're going to have sustained winds between 25 to 40 miles an hour with wind gusts that could reach speeds of over 60 plus miles an hour, and any fire that starts will spread exceptionally fast. Alrighty, folks, let's take a look now at our global computer models and some high-resolution models concerning the tornado outbreak on Monday. But we're also going to be looking at Sunday too, because Sunday is quite concerning nonetheless, especially again along the Rockies here and the high plains where we are going to have a tornado risk. First of all, what is going to spin up those tornadoes is this upper level low pressure system over the Intermountain West moving into the Rockies tomorrow. This is responsible for some thunderstorms and some much colder temperatures across California. That low is out of here and now is moving into the Intermountain West and the desert Southwest as well. And then parts of this is going to be ejected into the high plains. And as this does so, we're going to get a lot of lift out of this, out ahead of that dry line tomorrow across the high plains, with dew points that are going to be highly susceptible for severe weather, with dew points that are going to be in the low to mid 60s. Out ahead of this, we're going to have a lot of lift, a lot of confluence along that dry line, and rapid height falls and pressure falls, allowing the air mass to destabilize and allow that to lift. Baroclinic ascent is what we're going to see out of this over Kansas, Oklahoma, into Nebraska. Now, as this system moves into the northern plains on Monday, that's when we're going to have the risk here for that prolific tornado outbreak. And that is because First of all, we have rapid height falls and pressure falls over Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Iowa. And again, what that ends up doing is the air is rising, it's lifting, right? Because when we lower the pressures and the heights, the air is lifting and it cools as it lifts, and we get thunderstorms, we get condensation that forms. And in this sense, we have intense tornadoes that are looking very likely, unfortunately, and the risk for very large hailstones out of this. And then, of course, down here to the south, we're going to have another severe weather event breaking out on Tuesday, mainly because this system is exiting and moving across southern Canada. And then there's another short wave behind it right here. You can see this little short wave trough PVU streamer that is going to be moving into the deep south and out ahead of this. Of course, with those modest height falls, we're going to see lift, and we're going to see convection that breaks out ahead of that, and that's going to be moving across the deep south. And that you can see the pinch off right here. See this? See that trough? And out ahead of that is where we have a lot of lift, a lot of baroclinic ascent, thunderstorms, strong winds, heavy rainfall, and again, the tornado risk for Wednesday. So this is for Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday next week, after we get past the big time urgent tornado outbreak that is anticipated there. And then after that, we'll have to keep an eye on maybe more interesting weather conditions out of this for the eastern seaboard. And speaking of that, let's take a look at our Doppler radar forecast, folks, because yeah, it's a good idea that we do cover that really quickly here on in today's video. And as we play this through really quickly, there's your low for Sunday afternoon. There is a convergence right in there, the dry line, and we get some thunderstorms that develop. Now the GFS model is not showing a whole lot here, just because that's the GFS for you. It has a hard time modeling and resolving these equations on where the storms will develop. But rest assured you, there will be severe weather tomorrow afternoon along the dry line in the high plains. And then as we go into Monday morning, we talked about this last night and yesterday in our live stream, that there's going to be a warm front that is going to lead to elevated instability above the boundary layer. Some of these storms will pose a threat for marginal hail and wind damage that could exceed 60 miles an hour. So keep that in mind, and a lot of lightning with this. There's going to be a barrage of lightning, I'm sure, with these storms as they are elevated. And then by Monday afternoon, that low develops and we get a really tight pressure gradient here. Because that low is deep, this high is rather strong. And between the two, we get strong winds from the south that come into this low pressure system. We have a dry line that is going to be in place, and the ending result here is going to be a classic severe weather setup where we have a cold front tailing off this west-southwest of the low, and then of course we have a dry line that is going to be in place south of that low into western Texas, and then a warm front that gets attached off the low and is kind of draped across the Great Lakes. And in that free warm sector is where we are looking at those strong tornadoes, and we could see EF3 plus tornadoes under this circumstance. Now, looking at the 500 millibar wind map profile, this is going to be our severe weather ingredients that are coming together. First of all, kinematics are pretty intense out of this. We have a very strong jet streak that is going to be overspreading the warm sector in Iowa, southern Minnesota, as well as Wisconsin into far eastern portion there of Kansas and Nebraska. Eastern, I meant to say, if I said it, yeah. Winds here are going to be about 80 knots. So they're going to be pretty strong, okay? And that's going to allow a lot of that energy to be released in the form of thunderstorms. Now, when we take a look at our 850 millibar chart here at 5,000 feet, which, by the way, 500 millibars is 18,000 feet overall. 850 is 5,000 feet, and then we'll be looking at the surface. And take a look at this. We're looking at the low-level jet for tomorrow. This is the 0Z run from tonight or from this morning, and you can see 66 knot winds over Kansas. That is pretty strong for Sunday night into Monday, and then that low-level jet really kicks butt as we go into Monday night into Tuesday here, where we have low-level wind profiles anywhere between 60 to 70 knots. I mean, this is really concerning when you think about it. And there could be isolated instances here with low-level winds exceeding 65 knots. That's hurricane force. And when you put instability on top of that and a lot of moisture, man, we are going to have a lot of problems out of this. Surface winds, pretty strong out of the south here, anywhere between 25 to 30 miles an hour, probably locally stronger in some areas with wind gusts over 45 to 55 miles an hour. These would be non-thunderstorm wind gusts here across Iowa and Minnesota. And on top of that, or while we look at the winds, we're also concerned about the lapse rates because the lapse rates are going to be awfully steep, okay? The winds are going to be going. We have the moisture transport off the Gulf spreading underneath this EML that is going to be advecting across the high plains into the Midwest and the northern plains on Monday with these lapse rates that are on the order of about 8.5 to almost 9 degrees Celsius. Just to put this into perspective, you don't see this very often over a warm sector, and every time it happens, you get a lot of instability that usually develops in the afternoon due to surface heating, okay? And this is what's going to lead to a lot of that instability. Along to go with that, our surface heating is going to be quite significant out there with temperatures in the upper 70s to lower 80s across Iowa, southern Minnesota, as well as Wisconsin into Missouri, as well as Oklahoma in the 80s, and then you get into the mid to upper 80s to lower 90s across central and southwestern Texas out ahead of that dry line. That's going to lead to a lot of instability because we have a lot of moisture that's going to be in place. And speaking of moisture, yes, mid to upper 60 dew points, even some low 70s out of this in Oklahoma and southeastern Kansas, and that is going to result in a lot of instability here, overspreading the warm sector underneath that EML that we have in place, where we have surface-based instability here, anywhere between 3,000 to 3,500 joules per kilogram. This is another unit of just saying there's a lot of thunderstorm juice, enough energy for updrafts to exert upon and bring with it some very large hail and tornado production. Given the wind shear that we're going to be seeing out of this, that is quite significant. And lastly, significant tornado parameter. I did want to show you this because this is a big concerning deal. Thank you, Thomas, in last night's stream for sharing this with me in yesterday's chat. And man, he isn't joking. He is not joking at all. This look at the 06Z Zulu HRRR model run for our significant tornado parameter fixed layer, and anything above a 5 here is deemed significant, and anything up to about a 7 or an 8 is yielding the risk for intense to violent tornadoes across southeastern Minnesota as well as Wisconsin. This right here, my guys, is really concerning, and I would not be surprised. Okay, Matthew agrees with me. He watched my live stream last night. I want to thank you all for tuning into that live stream. And Matthew and me agree that a high risk will be somewhere issued in this little area. Right here locally is where I think a high risk of severe weather will be issued. And it will be driven by tornadoes because that's pretty much the moderate risk that is driven by it at this given time. So if we have a high risk, it's going to be tornado driven, unfortunately. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but if it does, it's going to happen somewhere around the day one outlook. There's a lot of outlooks that they issue throughout the day one forecast, and so we will see if they issue any high risk leading up to the last day one outlook before the outbreak gets going. Now to review with what we just talked about in today's video regarding the prolific extreme tornado outbreak that is anticipated over Iowa, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. I need you all to please be safe because this could really cause fatalities. This is a very serious situation that I need you all to really pay attention to in coming days because I will not have any afternoon upload today on my YouTube channel. I'm not going to be able to do anything on Monday, unfortunately, and that's because I have a dental appointment and then I have work afterwards. Maybe I'll have to squeeze in something, maybe like a shorts update or something for the YouTube channel because, man, I am really concerned. I mean, this this has a look that really warrants a high risk in this small area. I really think we're going to have something upgraded here in later outlooks. Hopefully not, but if it happens, be prepared. Don't be scared, because we are going to have several intense tornadoes, or several strong tornadoes with a few intense tornadoes out of this environment. If any supercell is becoming well established, or if it's able to. And then lastly, big time hail and some damaging wind gusts. Now, but anyways, if you found this video very helpful, informative, and detailed, please don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Hit that bell notification icon so you get all notifications every time I go live, I make a video, or I make a shorts feed, or I simply make a post here regarding the severe weather, hurricanes, or winter storms. Also, leave a comment in the section below and slap that like button, because you guys are really awesome. We hit 2,000 views in yesterday's video, or we got close of doing so. So thank you guys for getting these videos out to your friends and family, because again, this is a very substantial severe weather outbreak that we're dealing with on our hands for Monday, April 28th, 2025. But anyways, thank you all for watching, and I'll be back with you more on Tuesday with more weather updates.